Let's talk really quick about the redheaded stepchild of this year's sort of comic book movie world, you could say. At least in the film world, I would say. When it comes to all the Marvel stuff that's been coming out lately, Thunderbolts stands out as kind of this film that nobody gave a chance, and that was probably the biggest mistake they made. I think there's this underlining factor that kind of makes Thunderbolts stand out for me, because you took characters. Now, you could say they're anti-heroes if you want to, but really at the end of the day, the way the film starts is that they're not anti-heroes. They're straight up villains. They're essentially hired gunmen, they're hired assassins, and they sort of band together and create their team up nonchalantly. It's almost like a willingness to work together out of pure survival. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. But it's really, it departs from that so much, because it's these characters that are the focus, but they're not the underlining. There's just something more about this film. This isn't a film about heroes or anti-heroes or villains or assassins or even Marvel. It's really like this exists sort of separately from Marvel in some capacity, because what it really is it's really this love letter to sort of loneliness or depression or the need to feel connection in some way. You have these lone characters. The main focus is on Yelena, played by Florence Pugh, who's the new Black Widow, essentially. And she's going through this time period where she feels lonely. She feels empty. She feels like there's nothing to kind of live for. All she's doing is going day to day with her paid job, and she kind of wants something more out of life. But she keeps getting drawn into this because it's all she knows. It's what she was bred for. She's a survivor of the Red Room. She's a Black Widow. She needs more out of life, and she's trying to find fulfillment. And you see that amongst everybody. Each one of these characters has some sort of thing that they're missing out of their life. There's pieces of them that's missing. And one of the things I hated the most was that, obviously everybody knows by now, they killed Taskmaster within the first 5 minutes. I read that it was meant for shock value. They probably just didn't know what to fucking do with her. And they ruined it, period, with how... I've been talking in the last couple of entries about, like, the superheroes and things that might feel nerfed. Superman feels a little nerfed. Mr. Fantastic feels a little nerfed. If anything's been nerfed to a point where it sucks, it's what they did to Taskmaster. Taskmaster is such a really good, developed character that could do so much more, and they dumbed it down to just this sort of zombie-like, brainwashed... I don't even know how to describe it, but it's not who Taskmaster is. Taskmaster is methodical. There's an actual way that he can be represented that is so much better than what Marvel did to him. And now that you have multiverse, maybe we'll see a different version of Taskmaster. I would love that. I'm sure a lot of fans would love that. Just to get a different vision of him now that this one is dead, it'd be nice. But then you've got US Agent, you've got Red Guardian, you've got Ghost. They are all sort of banding together because they all are sort of missing something. Red Guardian doesn't have much going on in his life. He's retired. Nobody really cares about him. He runs a limousine service. Nobody cares about him. You have US Agent. He's become so obsessed with the idea of being a representative of Captain America in some way that he's shunned his family out. His family doesn't care for him anymore. He's by himself. He's also alone. And then you have, Bucky Barnes, who's always been struggling with the idea that he's the Winter Soldier and all of the shit he's done in the Marvel Universe. All of these characters, in some way, shape, or form, have some kind of trauma. And when you talk about the character Bob, played by Lewis Pullman, when he comes in, it sort of emphasizes that to a lot of them, because what people say online, unfortunately, it's like one of those things where it's like, if you were to dumb down somebody's special abilities, this is what it would sound like. So it's like, oh, what's the Flash's superpower? He runs. it's vastly better than that. It's way more than just he runs. But what is Bob's superpower? He's depressed. That's what Bob's superpower is when you dumb it down to that kind of level. Because what has happened with his personality is that it's split into two different things. He's himself, which is a superhumanly strong, capable of flying, capable Superman-like strength and agility and superpowers, and then just the Void. And the Void, to me, is probably one of the best things they could have brought into the Marvel Universe, because the Void is such a crazy concept, and how they represented it is just phenomenal. And that's one of the things that I loved about the way they developed their characters, is that they don't all just need each other because they have nothing going on in their lives. They essentially need each other because that's what's making them feel whole. Everybody is missing something in their life, and his superpower might be depression, but it's a really good representation of all these different levels of what depression actually is. Depression is loneliness. Depression is unfulfillment. Depression is isolation. Depression is all of these things, and that's represented so lovely throughout the story and throughout connecting these characters and just showing what Bob is going through. Like, it's sort of traumatizing in a way for anybody who kind of handles that kind of stuff, but it's also this sort of way of showing you, like, hey, here's another way that you can look at it. Like, you might not think that anybody's there, but this is all the people that can be there for you. And just there's so much to love about the way that they presented this story that it's hard for me to really shit on this movie. Of course, there are a few things that you could say that are sort of negative, like, honestly speaking, where is anybody? Where are the Avengers? Where's anybody to come and help them? You're telling me this huge shadow starts engulfing New York City, and nobody just, like, gets a call, like, hey, Captain America, new Captain America, who's been established, Sam Wilson, where you at? Because New York is about to just go completely dark from being engulfed by this superhuman cloud creature thing. Can you come help us with, like, anybody? And nobody shows up. It's just left to the villains to sort of do the thing, and none of them have superpowers, which is one thing that I will say is kind of upsetting, is that the only ones with any sort of real pull, I guess you can say, against Sentry would probably have been Red Guardian and Winter Soldier, and they were just thrown around like toys. But Ghost doesn't have that kind of strength. I think, if I remember correctly, U.S. Agent injected himself with some of the super soldier serum, which makes him a little bit stronger, but not that crazy strong. And as far as I knew, Yelena was just like Black Widow. They're just really good fighters. They're not really that strong. Like, there's a whole scene where she's on his back and he goes flying up into the ceiling. Like, he must have been holding back, because if he used all of his strength, she would have been dead. Like, are we ignoring that? Because that's one of the biggest things, is that you have this all-powerful being, and the only reason he gets defeated is because he turns on Valentina. And when he turns on Valentina, she has already built in a kill switch to kind of get rid of him if he goes rogue. Otherwise, he was unstoppable, essentially. Especially when nobody else comes to the rescue. He was legitimately unstoppable. Yeah, I guess, how do you beat that? Well, you beat it from the inside. And just the representation of how that scene plays out. It gets hard to get that out of my head, because I feel like there's a lot of people who can relate to that feeling of, like, you have people that are around you that might be able to help you, but they're so far out of your reach. Like, it's just, it's almost romantic in a way, like that sort of the sort of sense of filmography that kind of shows you visually a representation of a feeling that you couldn't really represent before, but when you see it, you know it right there on the spot. Like, just that feeling of people being there, but even though they're there, they couldn't be more further away from you. And that's really what Bob goes through, is that he's going through this idea that he's battling being, like, feeling worth it, feeling like somebody feels that he is worth it. It's worth it for him to live. It's worth it for him to sort of survive and to think about himself positively. And that's emphasized when they all sort of break free and they come to his aid, because then he actually feels that love. While he's beating his sort of shadow self, he feels that there is actually something to live for and something that he could suppress that demon. You know, I was going to say negative feelings, but that demon inside of him. The void is essentially a demon that's representing him. That's a part of, unfortunately, his psyche. It's part of him forever. And the end of the film shows you that he's kind of not doing anything, which, you know, you've sort of benched him completely because he can't do anything. The second he starts doing anything, he runs a risk of the void taking over. And the void is uncontrollable, so he's kind of saying, I'm never going to do this again. I'm not going to be a superhero or a supervillain or anything. Just, you know, watch me. Let me have my tea and read my magazine, and I'm just not going to help. Okay, don't let the void out. That's really what it is. Like, there's just this the buildup of how they just created the atmosphere of just the villain isn't that there's villains, and the villain isn't that there's some brainwashed character that Valentina has control over, because essentially she has control over all of them, but that's not even the villain. The real villain is essentially just mental health. That's really what it is at the end of the day. And what happens to win it over is you come together. You find love. You find togetherness. You find compassion. You be there for one another. And if you can be there for one another and show that there is a strength with all of you being together, it gives you more strength to kind of not feel that nothing is worth it. And in that, you find worth. It's just a beautiful story, and it's just weird that this was told in a Marvel movie. Like, it's probably the most meaningful Marvel storyline that they've done in a few years, because it just... If you were to just make this and just make it like it's this, I don't know, special agent movie where it's got a sci-fi fantasy angle to it, and all it's about is just conquering this creature who just sucks the depression out of you, it would still be a great story. Like, this story is just something so off base. It sort of feels like Winter Soldier. Like, the Winter Soldier, Captain America the Winter Soldier, just felt like a completely different movie separate from Marvel. It felt like this spy epic, this 007 with superpowers. It felt different. This feels different. This feels completely off base for anything. They weren't trying to build a universe or connect it to a universe in any way. It just felt like it was trying to tell this really unique story and have this unique vision on just what it feels like to be alone. But at the end of it all, you have to come to terms with you're not alone. And it's just you in your own head making yourself believe that there's nobody there for you. But there really is. And that, to me, is beautiful. And there's something very beautiful about how they were able to do that with this film. And that's why this has a very special place in my heart.